It is January 24th, 2026, and today I'm talking about the ICE shooting which occurred in Minneapolis today on Alex Jeffrey Pretti, who was 37 years old. He was a legal firearms owner. He was a licensed nurse, and he lived in southern Minneapolis. There was 10 shots that were fired in 5 seconds, and the agents shown disarming were essentially put in danger. They were called over by this man who was recording them and without their permission, really. And so, as an ICE officer, if you're a police officer, ICE officer, you see somebody recording, you're going to go over and ask them what's going on. And with that being said, it leaves the question, did these ICE officers use excessive force in the shoot? And so I'm going to discuss that right now. We're going to talk about it. We're going to review the video. We're going to react to it, and we'll go through it. I'm going to give my stance as a former police officer and kind of what I know, and kind of just based on the training I've seen. But what I've seen in the video so far seems to me like it's a justified shoot. However, it is definitely a cluster because you can't really tell, you can't really see you can't really see what's going on. It's very difficult because there's so many different angles, so many different videos, but at the same time, we're not really getting good footage of who pulled their firearm first. And the most that we're seeing now is that the ICE agents actually pulled their firearms first, and that they did find that he was armed, but he was a legal gun owner. And essentially, with that being said, it led to all of this. So let's react to the video and let's actually see what we all think about it. I think, again, that this was a clean shoot. I think that this was definitely ultimately self-defense. Our ICE agents are out there. It's dangerous. And ultimately, we have to remember that, again, we are in a very contentious time in America, a very, very dangerous climate. So before we get into the reaction, I'll just read the article that I wrote. Breaking fatal shooting of now identified Alex Jeffrey Pretti by ICE agents in Minneapolis, full fact pattern. On January 24th, 2026, at approximately 9:05 a.m., 37-year-old U.S. citizen Alex Jeffrey Pretti was fatally shot by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents during an immigration enforcement operation in the Witter neighborhood of southern Minneapolis, at the intersection of 26th Street and Nicolite Avenue. Pretti, a resident of South Minneapolis, was a University of Minnesota graduate holding an active nurse's license with no recent criminal history beyond traffic tickets and was a lawful gun owner with a permit to carry. This incident occurred as part of Operation Metro Surge, a massive federal immigration crackdown under the second Trump administration, marking the third shooting by immigration agents in Minneapolis within 3 weeks. It was followed by the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Renee Good on January 7th, which was another shooting involving a Venezuelan man. Oh, never mind, that's not accurate. Involving a Venezuelan man the following week, amid ongoing mass protests against ICE activities in the Twin Cities. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Pretti approached agents with a handgun, resisted attempts to disarm him, and an agent fired in self-defense. Bystander video footage shows several agents wrestling Pretti to the ground near a parked car with multiple shots, reportedly 10 within 5 seconds, were fired. Slowed-down analysis of the footage suggests agents may have disarmed him prior to the shooting, with frames showing empty hands, though earlier moments depicted a gun in hand. One agent appeared to strike Pretti with an object during the struggle. Pretti was transported to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. In the aftermath, over 100 protesters gathered at the scene via rapid response networks like Signal chats, leading to tense confrontations. Federal agents deployed tear gas, stun grenades, flashbangs, and batons. At least one protester was pepper sprayed, and 2 were arrested for crossing police tape. Protesters chanted, "I smell Nazis, ICE out now," blocked streets with dumpsters, and shouted profanities at officers who reportedly mocked them in response. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara pleaded for calm, urging residents not to destroy their own city, while federal officials initially blocked local police from the scene. Investigations are underway with Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty collaborating with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to secure the scene. FBI armored vehicles arrived hours later. Public reactions have been strong, with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz calling on the shooting as sickening, urging President Trump to end the operation and leaving the withdrawal of thousands of violent untrained officers, and the enforcement of this entire investigation to the state. They want it. Tim Walz wants to leave this to the state. Obviously, Tim Walz is upset. He's mad. Over $250 million has been exposed to fraud in the state of Minneapolis via Nick Shirley's expose recently, which again that revealed I think it was like $110 million in the first video, and then the second video it was like $16 million. So it's crazy. But the sources for this were Reuters, New York Post, and DHS. And now let's watch the videos. So let's actually. That tends to happen when you're going to put the phone in the ICE agents' faces, and you're going to look for a confrontation. Now, I'm not saying that these ICE agents did everything correctly. Not. Okay, ultimately, yes, there could have been more de-escalation from what I see in the video here. I really do believe that there could have been more done. However, at the same time, it's like on a complete operation to make the Trump administration look bad with all of this. You know, they want to make the Trump administration look like this is Nazi Germany, 1945. So that way we can look like the UK and we bring in all these illegal immigrants here. Okay, but to react and focus on the video here, yes. So I do believe that the ICE agents could have done more to de-escalate. However, if this guy's armed and he's resisting, like, come on. Why would it, like, first of all, why didn't you just answer the questions? Why didn't you just talk to these guys? Who knows what was said? We're going to have to find more out. But there's multiple videos that show different angles. And this is, again, a closer up video of just kind of what happened and what we're able to see here. So we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 crossing over here, maybe 8, 7 or 8 ICE agents, maybe a couple more, a couple less, give or take. But yeah, they fired 10 rounds into Alex. Unfortunately, he did not survive. So the Homeland Security put out a statement on this at 9:05 a.m. Central Time as DHS law enforcement officers were conducting a targeted operation in Minneapolis against an illegal alien wanted for violent assault. An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, seen here. The officers attempted to disarm the suspect, but the armed suspect violently resisted. More details on the armed struggle are forthcoming. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of fellow officers, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics on scene immediately delivered medical aid to the subject, but was pronounced dead at the scene. The suspect also had 2 magazines and no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. About 200 rioters arrived at the scene and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement on the scene. Crowd control measures were deployed for the safety of the public and law enforcement. The situation is evolving and more information is forthcoming. And again, that was the statement released by the Homeland Security, DHS.gov. This was the firearm that was found on this man. So again, right here we have the magazine, which is right on top of the barrel of the gun here. Looks like it's attached, but it's not. This is a magazine, and it has, it looks like it's fully loaded. It has a bullet in there, has a round in there. And then this also looks to be, yeah, I mean, this was found on his person, during the incident. So this was also, and then we have the statement that was released by Mayor Jacob Frey in Minneapolis, where he essentially is instigating, and he's saying, hey, these ICE agents are Nazis. We don't want any more of these people enforcing the law and doing their federal mandated duties which is essentially an executive order by the president. They have to federally follow these laws of arresting, detaining illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants. And that's what this is about. But I think a lot of this is also about the fraud that's been exposed. And because it's been exposed, this is a way of getting payback on the American people. You have to remember, you've all been defrauded by billions of dollars. It's not just 250 million. It's billions, billions, like 25 billion is the number that's been swirling around when you kind of consider all of the fraud that's been perpetrated on the American taxpayer, not just in Minneapolis, but honestly across the entire country. And that this is only the beginning, and this is only the tip of the iceberg when you look at this entire event. So let's listen to what Mayor Jacob Frey has to say about this incident, what his statements were. You tell me, does this sound like he's inciting more violence, inviting more violence to the city of Minneapolis instead of trying to tame and calm the situation? Let's listen. Actually, being by Somalis. There we go. No accountability. I'm tired of being told that our elected officials are not. That's crap. Obviously, this is instigating. This is how we instigate violence in America. This is politicians using their platform to leverage violence on law enforcement, on the American people. This is creating civil war dynamics. And that's what they want here. They want to recreate the film that was just made last year, 2025 Civil War. And they want to create this entire this entire dynamic. They want that architecture. They want the Hunger Games. They want violence overall. And it's the politicians doing this. They want us all fighting against each other instead of focusing on the fraud that's happening, instead of focusing on the real illegal immigrants that are coming here and taking your jobs, taking all of your benefits. Like this, it's your tax dollars that are paying for it. I mean, you tell me, is it okay? I don't think it's okay. Let's go on. What did you do, Mayor Jacob Frey? What have you done? And they want to, again, revert all the power to the state so that way the state can do nothing about it. So they can continue instigating more violence in the entire city of Minneapolis. So again, I wanted to cover some of these other videos. There were more videos that better footage of actually. Again, this is the original video. This is the first video I saw this morning of this entire event. So it looks like we have the ICE agents coming out. This is like where we see the video start. Again, we're probably going to see more CT surveillance footage coming out where it shows more about what happened. We're seeing all the different camera angles. There were a lot of witnesses, but again, this is like the first video I saw. This is the video that's been going mostly viral. And by the way, I mean, like, it looked like he was literally fighting with, like, I'm not saying he was fighting with him. I'm saying, like, the officer came up to him asking him, hey, why are you recording? What are you recording? Probably asked, are you a U.S. citizen? Are you a legal U.S. citizen? That's what they've been asking people. Because it's a fast way, people say, what, I'm not an illegal citizen, but why does it matter? Sometimes people just give themselves up early. That's why we're trained to ask those questions right out of the gate like that. So, again, I do find it interesting, though, as we're coming over here, this officer, all he's doing is just pushing him to the side of the road. But this guy is just still getting in his face. He's got a camera in his face. And again, this officer is not reaching for his gun. He's trying to get him out of the road, first off. He is resisting already. He's already, like, stepping up to him. He's squaring off with him. I mean, quite literally, that is a stance of defiance in itself. So again, I mean, the question is, should we have the right to stand up to law enforcement like this? And when I say that, I don't mean take a video. I mean, like, when they're pushing you and giving you demands and commands to, hey, get out of the road. Here, let's talk. Here, let me ask you some questions. Do we immediately just pull out the phones and just, like, we just, like, square up with them and size up? I mean, like, that's my thing here. So, like, if he hadn't sized up with this officer, if he hadn't taken the video, if he wasn't even there, that's one argument you could say. But you also say, well, it's the First Amendment. We have the right to record and we have the right to document. Journalists have the right to document. Absolutely. And that's not what I'm saying either. I believe that journalists do have the right to film and to document their opinions, but at the same time, you need to be smart and you need to be safe about doing it. Okay, you can't square off with police officers, nonetheless federal agents. And this was the statement that was made by the police chief. What was his name? Chief Brian O'Hara. By the way, I think this man is totally incompetent for his line of work. I think he should not be a police officer. I think he is completely bought, he's owned, and he does not represent the badge. And that was the video we saw before for his statements. So again, this is the slow motion clip that kind of shows more of the different angles that are shot. So again, in the video, we can see this is Alex right here. And hold on, let me make sure we're still going live. I think we're good. Okay. Hold on. I lost the live 1 second. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Different kind of setup here. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay, so as you can see in the video, Alex is here on the ground, and he's sitting there in a self-defensive position. We're clearly able to see that he is armed, but a firearm, looks like this agent pulls his firearm, Alex's firearm. Looks like he pulls it out right here, maybe. And this agent, again, Seems like he pulls out a gun right here. You can see it in his right hand. Boom, gun. And so this was the moment before the shots were fired, and the agent behind him ended up taking those shots. And then here is another video angle of this same shooting. Sorry about the noise in the video. I can't control that. Could you imagine being an ICE officer and having to do that in there? So you pepper sprayed. So it looks like there he is. Alex is right here. He gets pepper sprayed. He's getting pushed out of the road. And then this is where it all starts. This is where it all begins, and it's almost impossible to see exactly what happens. I mean, we're going to definitely be waiting for body cam footage and Alex's video footage, of course. It's honestly just, and you can't really. Pay attention to these two agents right here. This one in particular ends up taking out the firearm. This one right here. So he just pulled out his firearm, this agent right here, as you can see. And then this is the agent who pulled the firearm. It's kind of hidden here. He pulled the firearm off of Alex. This is the agent who takes the shots. And then I think this agent eventually pulled his gun, and the same thing happened. This is what it looks like happened. I mean, it's kind of impossible. It's like really hard. So yes, definitely looks like, yeah, they could have handled it better. The guy wasn't literally plain and simple. He's just he's acting crazy. He's attacking like 8 different agents. It looks like quite a few of them had their guns out too. I think they all saw the gun, and obviously all the agents ended up acting. You know, as police officers, you're trained to do that. You see somebody with a gun, every cop on that call is going to jump on that dude and disarm the guy. So again, it looks like we have a gun here. Looks like he has his gun out. Maybe him too. It's so hard to tell. Let's do some freeze frames. And if you guys see anything, clip this video. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. But if you ask me, this is definitely a clusterfuck. You know, this is what we call a clusterfuck. This is a really shitty call. Because this guy is recording. He's kind of, you know, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He's recording. He's using his First Amendment right. He's completely able to do that. The ICE agents ended up they got out of the car. They asked him, hey, why are you filming us? What's the deal? Are you following us? They wanted to know why he was filming. And the guy obviously said, well, I don't have to tell you why I'm filming. Said something to those, probably said something to that degree. Very sad. Obviously, we pray for all of the victims and we pray for the families. But at the same time, we also have to remember that this is the same individual, Alex, who was hanging out with this guy at a recent date. And so that's pretty crazy. Sorry for any of the GIFs there that are on the screen because people on X are crazy. And so the conversation is pretty much swirling about. So then I've had some people commenting on some of my statements here. This actually went pretty viral. Well, not viral, but not bad for my account. I have a smaller account, 2,263 views. on this and 5 retweets. And then we have one person who said, slowed down analysis of the footage suggests agents may have disarmed him prior to the shooting, with frames showing empty hands though earlier moments depict a gun in hand. Yeah, I mean, that definitely happened. Yeah, I saw that happen as well. But the issue is he was resisting, and if he's armed, we have to disarm him. And we don't know if he has a second gun on him. We don't know if this guy has a knife on him. If he's already being aggressive towards law enforcement and we're unable to detain him when he's already acting aggressive, if we're unable to ask him questions and figure out why he's recording, then what else are we supposed to do? And I'm not saying kill him, but I'm saying, when again, like we got 6, 7 agents on him, this is where law enforcement fails a little bit. It's like, come on, like I could have taken that guy. Like this Alex guy does not look like he's a big dude, respectfully speaking, but very easily controllable. Okay. And then this was just another poll that was ran and onto different information, I guess. But this was a poll I ran: was Jeffrey Epstein a pedophile or a CIA plus Israel spy? Because honestly, it's kind of a debate now, right? Like, was Jeffrey Epstein an Israeli spy just setting up government officials in the United States, or was he a pedo too? And out of 451 votes, people say that he was both. Because I agree with Nick Fuentes to what he says, but at the same time, yeah. So, anyways, I didn't really mean to click on that, but I figured since I did, we'd talk about it. So again, the other comments on this entire incident of the shooting, I had an Alonzo Barros say, if the murdered man's cell phone and the video footage it contains are not recovered, it becomes increasingly clear that the BP officers, Border Patrol officers involved in the shooting are guilty. And then Grok ended up saying, based on recent reports from NYT, CBS, and CNN, bystander videos show agents tackling and shooting the man after a struggle, with disputes over whether he was armed at this time. No sources mention a cell phone or footage from the victim. His gun was recovered. BCA and FBI are investigating amid conflicting DHS and local accounts. However, I agree with Alonso that, yeah, I mean, that's suspicious if we don't get the guy's cell phone. I mean, we saw the guy recording. I definitely want to see the guy's cell phone footage. And then I had one more guy, Morrow04 on X, comments on my post. Maybe you can educate me, since I am not former law enforcement like you are. At what point during that interaction did it seem necessary for the officer to attempt to take him to the ground? So, I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That's a very fair question. He also said, the same guy also said, I'm not trying to be difficult either. I just don't understand the reasoning. So I'd like to learn. So honestly, I mean, trying to understand it from my law enforcement POV, kind of from my experience, these cops are under a lot of stress. They're under a lot of pressure. These guys are out there 14-hour days, a lot of them just doing what they're supposed to do, right? Making arrests, and a lot of them getting in trouble for it, getting in trouble for the way they do it. This career is not black and white. It's a lot of gray spots. And, this is a human job. This is where Elon Musk will come in and say, this is why we need the robots to take over, right? But, this is why robots can't so easily replace law enforcement, right? And the reason that robots can't replace law enforcement is because of these kind of events, this kind of judgment and quick thinking. AI can't really think that quick on its feet. Maybe it can. Maybe we're getting close to that point of singularity. But in my honest opinion, I just think that these officers truly, they were scared. They walked up to this individual, and this individual is, recording. We don't know why he's recording. We don't know if he was impeding traffic like Renee Good was, right? Renee Good, we have video footage of her where she was like jamming out in her car, like moments before the shooting, impeding traffic, blocking the road from ICE, basically obstructing them from being able to do their work, following them around, trying to take pictures of their license plates, and so I'm assuming that maybe some of that activity was happening. Maybe it wasn't. But with that being said, it's still important to note that, yeah, I mean, as a police officer myself, I probably just would have kept going. But if he was the person of interest who they needed to arrest, or if he was harboring a fugitive, then that's a felony. What if he was harboring an illegal immigrant? What if he had information on an illegal immigrant? Again, from the photo we just saw, this photo right here, where is it? I just had it here. Looks like, oh man. Oh yeah. People are definitely disagreeing with the take. Yeah. Genius, yes. Oh, these are just comments on other stuff that I have posted. Ultimately, I do think it's a self-defense shoot. I do think that it was a good shoot overall because just again, because of the situation and the circumstance at bay, right? Like this is just an impossible situation. This is not easy to handle this kind of stuff. So with that being said, it's like we have to understand that again, nobody's perfect. Law enforcement officers aren't perfect. Nothing we do is going to be a perfect thing. It's never going to be perfect, right? Especially as cops. Again, we're not robots. The AI hasn't come yet, guys. Unfortunately for you, anti-police, the Tesla bots have not replaced us yet. iRobot has not become true yet. We have not replaced law enforcement with robots yet. Unfortunately, I know you guys hate cops. I know some people hate cops. Some people are very untrusting, and I completely understand that. But at the same time, it's like, you know, that's my response. If you're walking up to a police officer and you're, whoa, oh, that was my light. That was my lighting. That was my lighting. Hold on. 1 second. Yeah, change the lighting. Charger went off there. There we go. My studio lighting had turned off on me. A little creepy. That's okay. It's not like I'm being watched or anything. But at the end of the day, this is just how I feel. You know, you're walking up to Ice Age. It's kind of berating them in some ways. You know, yeah, I'm not saying, this was right by the ICE agents, like I've been saying time and time again here, but, this is an example of how, from a law enforcement degree, we need to be a little bit more communicable with people. You need to be able to, talk to people, get at their level. That's always what I try to do as a police officer. Like, I definitely would have pushed you out of the road. I would have pushed Alex out of the road if I definitely hurt or hit. But I've also dealt with a lot of calls where people are extremely violent. There are a lot of people who hate the police. And I want to say that if this ICE agent was killed, if the roles were reversed, right? Same thing with Renee Good. If that ICE agent had been run over by Renee Good, or if this ICE agent had been shot by Alex, not saying that Alex would have. He was a legal firearms owner. So I'm not saying Alex was a bad person to any degree, based on what we know now, at least as of this time. But what we do have to objectively realize is that the climate of today is extremely violent, and the politicians in Minnesota are being totally exposed for fraud, billions of dollars of fraud. And so, because of that, they're taking it out on the American people, and they're doing it in a way that puts us all at war with one another. While they dine and they enjoy their caviar and their meals, and like Piers Morgan said, they're enjoying their curry. They don't really care about what's happening in your world. They don't really care that people are dying, that we're all at war with each other. These people don't care, right? They want this country to burn. They want this country to struggle. And I'm not trying to spit propaganda here. I'm just telling the truth. Law enforcement is such a interesting career, and one of the reasons I got out of it wasn't because I didn't love the job. It was because of these kinds of incidents. How can you really change the world as a cop today, honestly, when this is what we have to deal with? It's like when you can't go and do your job, and it's like we try to be peaceful, we try to do everything right by the codes of the law, by the guides of the law. And, again, to answer the question from the commenter who would ask, like, hey, what's the right way to handle this? Well, again, we have 7, 8 different ICE agents that were there on the scene. It's like, you guys definitely could. I mean, this is where subject control comes in. This is why it's like we need to pay more for jujitsu training and Muay Thai. I knew all this stuff before becoming a cop. I knew how to fight, so I never had a problem fighting. I never felt truly afraid on a call that I had been on that I wasn't able to contain the individual or the person. So perhaps we can always point to law enforcement training, but ultimately these people are the left. It's the radical left. They fucking hate America. They hate police officers. They want to kill us. And again, if these ICE agents were killed in this incident, they would be celebrating it. They would be laughing. They would be just like they did with Charlie Kirk. They'd be celebrating his death. Okay, we're not celebrating Alex's death here today. Okay, everybody who's voting for Trump, we're not celebrating his death. We're analyzing what happened so it doesn't happen again. But we're also realizing that this is so obviously a psyop. This is so obviously the United States government trying to destroy us from within, put us all at war with each other. They want Civil War to become a real life movie. The movie Civil War, you ought to watch it. Alex Jones talks all about it. Nick Fuentes has covered it. Andrew Tate has also covered it. And they, I mean, honestly, it's everybody should watch it because it's a fair warning of what is going to happen in this country if we keep fighting with all of the infighting. We need to be protesting against the Zionist Jews because at the end of the day, they're the ones controlling our government. It's nothing personal. It's not again. It's not anti-Semitic to say that, but that's the truth. Look at everything that's happening. If you want to really argue this entire thing, we do have to wonder, like, who's training with ICE, who trains with our special forces, IDF. I mean, like, I'm just saying, it's kind of weird, and ultimately, I'm not saying that there is any involvement. I'm not trying to be any conspiracy theorist or spread misinformation here, but it is a fact. Yeah, we're about to be in a war with Iran on Israel's behalf for some regime change that the United States government wants, again, on Israel's behalf. We're taking Greenland, which I love that. I want to have the Western Hemisphere as America, and I think that's awesome. But at the same time, it's just like, what we're really doing is walking ourselves into an impossible battle here. Okay, just before this story, there's already been like a ton of other stories that have come out. Like 13 hours before this event, there was a gas explosion that happened in the Bronx, and this allegedly had fire activity here before, but why don't we talk about that? Why is that being hidden in the algorithm? I had posted about that and it got a little bit of attention, but we have AOC and listen to her say this and how she's always, it's just constant instigation of anti-ICE, anti-police, anti, the people, anti-freedom. And it's ultimately freedom for the criminals, freedom for illegal immigrants, not freedom for tax-paying American citizens. And that's where I have a problem with all of this. And with, it's so obviously a psyop. It's obvious that they're trying to divide and conquer the American people. And to like see the debate happening on Twitter, it's just like frustrating. It's like, how do people not see it? So let's listen to AOC just 17 hours ago, where she essentially is berating ICE for, again, another thing. Again, just any. Now, I will say this. I like that AOC has the intelligence to actually question, hey, Fourth Amendment right, search and seizure. You shouldn't be able to just. I agree with that. I agree. Cops shouldn't be able to just go into your house. We saw what happened during COVID. That was a complete police state in Seattle. They were quite literally trying to disarm everyone. Okay, what was the video that was going viral on? Gosh, it was during COVID, and all of these. It was all of the law enforcement at the time. They were just following orders, but people had to stay inside their homes, and somebody was on their porch and they got a beanbag fired at them, right? And so there is so much truth to what AOC says when she says, yeah, we do need to protect the Fourth Amendment, the search and seizure. We got to protect the American people's constitutional rights, all of that. But let's not straw man this argument. Let's not fake what's actually happening. These people, these Somalis, these foreign immigrants that are coming in here for free through fraud, via fraud, it's happening. It's a fact. They're coming in here. They're taking your jobs. They're completely violating the law. They can't drive. And look at this. They don't treat us with respect. They're not Christians. And that's the whole point. This is an anti-Christian operation. And if you don't understand that, then at a core level, you're never going to understand anything that's happening. And so, being a former cop myself, I don't necessarily agree with this shooting, but I also, I still find it to be self-defense. And I am going to take the side of ICE because ultimately it's like, what are you doing recording? Why are you getting in our faces of law enforcement when it's like, what we're doing? We're out here trying to do our jobs. We're getting paid to arrest illegal, undocumented immigrants who are committing fraud, who have warrants, who have real offenses, and all of the stuff they're saying that, oh, well, half these people don't even have offenses, they're innocent people. That's a lie. That's not true. That's not true. And so these Democrats who want to argue all of this, it's like, I understand where you're coming from. I see that you don't want a police state, but listen, the police state is allowing fraud to happen. The police state is allowing crazy radical leftists to run into police officers, to run into people, to burn down police stations and banks, and to burn down the entire cities and all of these things. And it's like, first of all, it's like, if you want to be an accelerationist and a revolutionary, it's like, that's not the way to go about it. You're just going to end up in jail. Look at what happened to Jake Lang, the January 6th political prisoner. Look at his life. He has to earn back his trust every single day. One, not only because there's a picture of him kissing the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and we know that he is Jewish, so we can't quite trust him. And it's kind of unfortunate because I love everything he's been doing and saying. I love Jake Lang, honestly, but it's hard. You can't trust somebody whose people have been, consistently disenfranchising the American people. We paid billions and billions of dollars for wars in the Middle East that we've never gotten out of. And we're being told that this is all a peace war or a peace war. We're being told that this is all a peace plan. And listen, I understand that. I agree with that too. I agree that there are certain things that need to be done. There are certain factions of international affairs that need to be taken care of, right? I do agree that Sharia law should be banned from America. However, I don't believe that that's the existential crisis in America, right? I believe the existential crisis in America is the Israeli occupation over the United States government in Washington, D.C. That is what's happening. That is the truth. And, it's not anti-Semitic to say that. I'm not an anti-Semite. I don't hate Palestinians who are the real Jews. I don't hate Ashkenazi Jews either. Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews. Listen, I want to live in a powerful, strong country. I'm all for taking Greenland with the Jews. I'm all for taking Venezuela with the Jews. If we can all win here, then it makes sense. And, having the foreign entanglements, that's the problem, though. Where it's eating into our politicians, it's eating into AIPAC, it's eating into our law enforcement, it's eating into the media. More importantly, who owns the media? Who owns BlackRock? Who ran the Davos Summit 2026? Larry Fink, BlackRock? Come on, guys. You have to really ask yourself, what is the benefit to all of these things happening? Is this really is this really a tragic story, or is this just a story they needed to put out there into the algorithm to get the conversation fuming again, to get the Civil War possibly ignited, so that way they can control you even more, have more laws, and ultimately they want to take away your Second Amendment. Ultimately, they want to defund the police. So that way, if there's no police, and if you're not armed, you can't defend yourself. And that's the game. That's the trick. If you're working for the Democrats, they love you if you're talking like that, because that's the Communist Manifesto. That's the Marxist ideology. That's the Marxist plan. So with that being said, we all have to remember that. With that being said, we all have to remember that nothing is going to just come easy when it comes to freedom. We have to fight for it. And what that means oftentimes is standing up for what's right and telling the truth. And also, we have to enforce the law as law enforcement officers. That's our job. And if you get in the way of law enforcement, you're going to start recording them. You're going to start getting in their face and squaring up with them. And you're going to go 1-on-6 or 7 or 8 or how many ICE agents were in this entire incident with Alex. It's like, okay, what do you think is going to happen? We can't do that, guys. And so at the end of the day, this is my response to the event. This is my response to what I believe is ultimately the main problem with all of this. We need to secure and protect ICE. We need to protect our law enforcement officers. We don't stick up for the corrupt law enforcement officers. We don't stick up for the officers who are breaking the law, but we do analyze and we break things down and we come to logical conclusions about these events. Because listen, at the end of the day, it's true. There's a lot of gray area in law enforcement, just the way it is. Robots aren't going to be able to replace us that easily, And as a former cop myself, that's just my analysis. I definitely would have handled this differently myself. I'm a little bit more patient as an officer. I have a little bit more restraint. Um, that's just my experience, at least. That's how I see myself. I believe I do have more restraints. I think I would have handled this maybe a little differently. I think I have a little bit better subject control, fighting skills. But listen, can't really say nothing until you're in the shit. Until you're really in the shit, until you're really dealing with danger, you're not gonna, you don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know how you're gonna act. What was that call not too long ago? I think 2 years ago, maybe a year ago. There was a police officer who completely froze. There was two instances of this. There was one for an active shooting where the officer did nothing and he just let it happen. He stood down, and it wasn't because I don't think it was because I don't think it was because he it was a planned thing like where he wanted people to die. Obviously, cops choke. Cops get scared. They get afraid. I've been afraid, but I am more of a fight kind of person. I'm fight. I'm not flight. And so in this case, though, I also don't have an ego. If there's any cops watching this, my biggest advice, just being somebody who's experienced it, being, somebody covering it, watching it from a civilian standpoint now, I believe that there does need to be some level of, persuasion, verbal judo. We need to be able to communicate with individuals, talk with them. If there's any training we should have in the police academies today, we should have training on more communication, having, be trained. We should be trained on how to talk to a camera. This will be interesting. Anybody who's watching this right now, you'll be interested to know that if there is anything that helps in law enforcement, it's knowing how to talk to people. And if there's anything we should change in law enforcement today when it comes to the police academies, we ought to teach people how to talk with a camera on your face. Now, I had a few scenarios like this at the academy I attended, and I had a very good police academy. I won't say where, but I had excellent directors and instructors, and we had scenario days where we had role players who would be in our face with the camera. They would be just like this kind of setup, just like this scenario that we see, this case study that we're doing right now. And what I really got from that, I learned how to talk to people, and especially sovereign citizens. I've been on a few calls myself where I've spoken with sovereign citizens and they have the camera on me. But what you have to do as a cop is you have to embrace that. Part of being a police officer and part of being an American is, knowing how to battle for the First Amendment and knowing what that means, the First Amendment. Anybody can record you. You see all the videos of the sovereign citizens. They'll post video. They'll take videos. They'll stand like on the public property part of a police department where it's just public, right? Where it's not private anymore, where it's like the sidewalk, and they'll make the video. And they'll wait for a chief or a lieutenant to come out there. And exactly what they're looking for is kind of this. They want a rise. They want to get you to lose your composure. They want you to lose your better judgment. They want to strike your ego. And as a police officer, you cannot let that happen. You need to think of yourself as, honestly, it sounds a little self-aggrandizing, but I always felt like you should approach the situation as an angel would, as Jesus would. Like, how would Christ handle the situation? Because honestly, it's like, Christ was both a defender of good, but he flipped the temples too. So you need to be like that. You need to be both a warrior and a guardian. You need to know how to handle a camera in your face when people are asking you questions without getting all pissed off. A lot of the time people just want to understand. People are interested. A lot of these sovereign citizens and people who want to record us with the phone, they're actually genuinely interested in knowing, how we do our job and why. Sometimes they actually have an audience that are educated. Sometimes you run into good sovereign citizens that genuinely don't want to hurt law enforcement, but they actually want to learn. So you have to take that into consideration. Part of law enforcement should be learning how to communicate, learning how to talk with a camera on you. Again, not every police academy trains you for that. My academy did. My academy just so happened to have scenario days where they'd have, role players coming in and they'd have that camera in your face, all the leftist talking points, right? Telling you, you can't arrest him, you can't do that, that's illegal, you're violating his constitutional rights, like all that shit. But we learned that. We learned how to communicate with that and how to understand their point of view. That's the most important part about being a cop, is that you should be able to be in between good and evil. You should be able to understand both sides. That way you can be the mediator properly. And an important part of being a police officer is just never letting your ego get to you. You have to be able to control yourself, to control your actions, and ultimately to talk to people like they're children and not like they're idiots. You don't disrespect people, and you don't have the whole dialogue where you act like you don't even give a shit about what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you genuinely need to like sincerely be interested in what they're saying, and then try to get at like pretend they're your family member. I think that if there was anything that could have helped this situation, being a former cop myself, you know, we need to pretend that everybody is like our own family and they've lost their mind a little bit and they're recording us. They want to get us in trouble, whatever. But we're just trying to understand them. We don't want to hurt them. We want our family to be better. We just want them to be okay. We want them to be happy. Want them to live good lives. Ultimately, that's how we should be thinking as law enforcement from a guardian's perspective. But from a warrior's perspective, these are illegal immigrants coming into our country, and then anybody harboring these illegal immigrants, anybody yelling at us in the face and screaming at law enforcement and you're bringing a gun, up against a bunch of cops, like come on, you have to be careful. Just be careful if you're going to be out there documenting what's happening and being a journalist. I'm all for that. That we need more of that. We need the freedom of speech, but you also need to be strategic. You also need to be brilliant about the way you do it. Okay, you need to be smart and cunning and clever, and that's kind of the trick. There was one guy who recently just went into his the town hall, and his way of protesting his points was in a satirical. He did a satirical delivery where he had like an old aristocratic like white wig, like the old Brits did, and he pretended to be a British oligarch. He pretended to be this British tyrant, and he's just like, "You people are not taxing the people enough. You city council, how hard it must have been for you to deal with all of these commoners coming in here complaining about $40,000 in taxes a year. You should be charging more in taxes." And his way of getting the point across was being satirical and having that kind of clever approach. No hostility, no violence, no threats. It was just pure genius. And he got the point across. He won the argument, made all of the town hall look like a bunch of idiots. So that's truly the art of protesting. You want to protest the right way, you need to be clever. You need to think like your enemy, think like law enforcement, think like the president. If these people are your enemy, think like them. And what's the worst thing that they would want? Well, the worst thing they want is trying to understand, coming from things from a learning point of view. The Joe Rogan strategy, I call it, because Joe Rogan, everything he does is always, he comes at every position from a point of analyzation and trying to analyze the situation. Okay, so ultimately, that's the trick. And that's what's going to allow the average human being to really succeed. That's what's going to allow most people to not end up in jail or killed. If you disagree with law enforcement or ICE today, my advice is to follow the law, be clever and cunning about the way you protest. But don't be out there in the streets where you're going to get shot. Why don't you just have a podcast? Like, just make videos. Just like expose it. Because now Alex can't even fight for what he believes in. It's like like I'm just trying to speak for the left, like trying to cover any rebuttals here. If you want to defeat law enforcement, and if you want to like do this in a way that makes sense, then you can't be crazy. You can't be a bunch of radical idiots. You can't be trying to run police officers over. You can't be trying to, just make everybody completely, make living impossible for everybody, right? Like, you can't do that. So that's my advice. And hopefully when it comes to everything with Alex, his family, I pray for Alex, his soul, and I have compassion for his life. I have compassion for Renee Good. I have compassion for the left. I think it sucks what happened overall, but it also sucks for law enforcement. It sucks for those ICE agents out there risking their lives, doing what they have to do, doing their jobs. So yes, I do think this was a good shoot. It was self-defense, ultimately. And the fact pattern suggests that had that man not been there recording and in the streets and then resisting and obstructing law enforcement operations, had he not done that, none of this would have happened. Had he maybe put his phone away and talked to the officers, maybe that wouldn't have happened, right? I just don't think that there was just no reason that the man was taken to the ground. Because the reason I would take somebody to the ground with a bunch of other officers is if we knew he had a gun. We've done it before. When we know somebody has a gun, like in a flee, I was in a flee and elude, and the man happened to be armed, and so we jumped on him. And there's like 6 of us in this flee and elude. We chased them for a good 40 minutes or so. And when we finally got him, yeah, we jumped on top of him. But we treated him humanely. I treated him with respect. I lowered my aggression and my adrenaline down, and I talked to him like he was a human being. And so that's ultimately what you need to do. So that's my angle on it. That's my angle on Alex. And based on any kind of new information, I guess real quick before we leave, we'll check out any new updates on the let's check any new updates. What's new on the situation before anything else? So the agent screaming, "Where's the gun? Where's the fucking gun?" Did the other agents take it before shooting? Was there even a gun in the first place? So this was 16 seconds ago. So we'll retweet this. Live retweet. Shout out to the War Monitor. Always great content. What do you guys think? Live stream post. Boom. What do you guys think? Honestly, though, because I want people's opinion. Oh, see, he said, "You got the gun. You got the gun. I got the gun." That's what I heard. So, you got the gun. Yeah, it's very interesting. Who knows? Again, more information to be told. Maybe I did a live stream too early on it, but I couldn't help myself because I could see the conversation swirling about. And, when you have people like Tim Pool and all of the big influencers who might be a little bit more, Theo Vaughn's kind of like that, they're a little bit more sensitive to these kind of subjects. But, coming from a law enforcement perspective, that's just, listen, at the end of the day, it's sad what happened, but you cannot be out there, you know, um, you can't be standing up to law enforcement in a way that's going to get you killed. Come on, maybe your heart's in the right place, but clearly shows ICE disarmed him, neutralized him, and then assassinated him in cold blood. So there's one angle on that. So that's from the Calacy account. Minneapolis signal infiltrated organizational signal groups all around Minneapolis with the sole intention of tracking down federal agents and impeding/assaulting/obstructing them. Buckle up, will be revealed. Each area of the city has a signal or several signals. Let's start with a screen recording of all members of the South Side group and start. So it looks like this is a thread of a bunch of different intelligence on federal agents. Interesting. President Trump can make this happen. So yeah, this is all the newest information since I started this video that's coming up. Hmm. Yeah, and that's very interesting. I mean, if they are doing their own investigation, that's definitely shady. Typically, you'd want internal affairs on that. Typically, you'll have the state investigate it. You'll have, typically, this would be like state police, or this would be like the FBI who would investigate it in that case. So we'll see what happens, but that's likely going to be the overall outcome. Is you're going to see the FBI might investigate it. DHS will do some kind of internal affairs investigation, and they'll probably cover up the story as much as they can, because it does seem like it's kind of a cluster. Like I said before, the entire event was a cluster, you know, just a complete shitstorm, complete tragic event. And again, so that's all I have to say on it. What do you guys think? Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Follow me for more reactionary content. That's how I make my living, just doing social media. You want to grow your business with lead generation, digital marketing. I am skilled in that. That's what I focus on. I can help you with building your business and doing all of that good stuff. I am experienced in Upwork I'm a realtor in Michigan, and I can also, hey, you want to have a podcast? Do you want to debate me? Do you disagree with me? Let's talk. And then again, I'm the CEO and founder of Gold Shark Media. So talk to me. Let's have a conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And with that being said, God bless. Stay safe out there. Do not be stupid. Stay prudent, stay powerful, and stay wealthy.